you have to lead with education. A lot of times you don't want to be the first one doing that because it's very expensive to educate a market. But when you're releasing a new product, whether that's just cannabis being sold in your state or your country for the first time, or it's a new cannabis product, it's a live rosin gummy, or it's an interesting minor cannabinoid being added into a product, you have to educate people on why that matters to them. Why should they be interested in that?
Training as the new marketing. Training as a marketing play is a hot topic across many sectors, but in the cannabis industry, it's even more essential given the advertising restrictions in place and given the important role budtenders play in brand gatekeeping. Danny Gold, co-founder and CEO at ZolTrain, sees it as his mission to educate the world on cannabis. But what does this mean? How are he and his team going about it? Let's find out. Welcome, Danny Gold, the co-founder and CEO at ZolTrain. Thanks for joining me today. First of all, let me ask, tell me a little bit about you and what you're doing and your career before cannabis and how you got into the sector. That would be a great place to start.
Yeah, that's a lot. I hope it'll be a 2-hour intro.
Okay.
Learn that, that I like to talk and get into it. But thanks so much for having me on, Dave. It's so great to connect. And I love anybody collecting stories, and obviously love talking about cannabis and education and tech and all the intersections there. So my background is technical. I'm an engineer by trade. I like to say that nobody around me hasn't let me write code in the better part of 15 years. I always say if I have to get a real job, I do something around product management. So I'm usually at the intersection of business and technology. So really sitting with customers and then people who have problems that are valuable enough to solve, where technology can be built and they're willing to pay to have those problems solved and make their lives easier. And I love those challenges. I love working with technical teams, and I love working on big new business problems and working with customers. On the cannabis side of the world, I'm here in Denver. We're more than 10 years into medical legalization, and then 2014. So however many years it's been since that, we're about 8 years into the adult use market. Myself and my co-founder got connected with an operator here in Denver, actually in Boulder, who was one of the original license holders in cannabis, who was having to train a lot of employees who had never worked in cannabis. It's a new market. We're seeing this over and over again in the US, right? When New Jersey issues their license and opens the stores, there's no trained workers in the entire state of New Jersey. It's never been legal there. There's probably people that know a little bit about cannabis. They don't know about the legal cannabis market and the compliance and the products on the market and how to connect with consumers and sell it legally. So we connected with a person here who was having to hire and train those people, and who was recording videos and kind of putting together their own training, and was looking for a technology solution. Said, hey, there has to be a better way to scale training. I've got a bit of a background in educational technology. A few different times in my career, I've been able to take new technologies. First, it was interactive CD-ROMs, and then it was video streaming platforms, enable that technology.
CD-ROMs, that's old school.
Yeah, that was actually one of the first things I ever did in technology in college for my work study program. Was we launched the first remote MBA program in the US, and we did it filming professors putting together interactive elements and mailing CDs. We didn't have internet connections that could support online streaming video, then to date that use of technology. And then around 2010, I actually authored a patent on interactive video learning, basically interactive elements in a video stream. So by 2010, obviously technology had shifted, bandwidth was better. Everybody was, kind of watching YouTube already around then. Said, hey, there has to be a better way to do this with students interacting and collaborating around points in time in a video. So with ZolTrain, we kind of had the opportunity to do that again. We're doing it now around cell phone based technology and how people are connecting around a cell phone. But I come at cannabis from the technology side and basically got connected with a license holder who had real problems, wanted to solve them. And, I think there were a lack of technology companies willing to work with cannabis companies, which we're still seeing. That's going to shift over time. But the traditional tech companies have given us, a really long runway to solve the problems in unique new ways. I think what's going to happen there is we're going to bring those technologies back into other markets versus other markets bringing their technology to us.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, again, it really shows that you've got this kind of commitment to training and using kind of different media outlets to actually engage people. And I think that's really at the crux of it. But what I thought was really interesting about what you guys are doing is that idea of training as marketing, and I mean, education being one thing. But how do you kind of dress that up then? I mean, not necessarily dress it up, but when you're kind of pitching the idea to different clients, the idea of, you can engage more people to, with your product by educating them about not just the product, but about the services around it. How does that kind of come together? And tell me more about the training as marketing.
It's one of those, not to do a flex. I happen to have it on my desk. We won a Clio. We won a top marketing award for
congrats.
a training platform. And this was last year. This was the second Clio Cannabis Awards. We won silver in the digital and mobile tech category. I'm obviously proud about it. I've got it here. But I think it was the perfect prop for marketing and training, right? We're an education company. We're an education tech company. What business do we have with a marketing award? How does marketing intersect here? Well, it's a new market that's never been available for consumers to purchase legally. Any new market starts with education, right? We always talk about this. If you were to release a brand new thing, the first electric car, right? The first Segway, anything that's really interesting and new and is a brand new change to consumers. It's not something they're looking for. It's not something they knew they wanted. You have to lead with education. A lot of times you don't want to be the first one doing that because it's very expensive to educate a market. But when you're releasing a new product, whether that's just cannabis being sold in your state or your country for the first time, or it's a new cannabis product, it's a live rosin gummy, or it's an interesting minor cannabinoid being added into a product, you have to educate people on why that matters to them. Why should they be interested in that? You're hoping they have a need that you can meet, but you have to weave in education. You have to tell them that this thing exists. They're not going to Google it. They're not going to go search for it because they didn't know it existed, right? So everything in cannabis starts with education. All of the marketing better have education in it, so you can explain to consumers why this is safe to purchase and legal to purchase and how they purchase it. So it can be education just around, how do I even acquire this? Hey, I saw a news story. My state's supposed to have dispensaries opening. What does that mean? Is that okay? Am I going to get robbed when I walk in here? Is this sketchy? Am I going to be able to keep my job? There's all kinds of education just on, is this something that I want to participate in? And then you go down the rabbit hole of, okay, you walk into a dispensary. This is overwhelming, right? That's the word that we hear all the time when we talk to, especially new consumers, is the big word is everything is overwhelming. The product selection is overwhelming. The people that are talking to me are overwhelming. If I don't know the lingo, I don't know the words they're using. One thing we talk about in new markets, those of us that work in the industry, that you kind of come numb, just like any industry, to acronyms and certain, words and lingo. The word flower. You get on a dispensary menu and you see a category called flower. Go poll consumers in a new market who have never purchased legal cannabis and ask them if they use the word flower to talk about buying cannabis. That's not what that word means.
No, exactly. I was having this exact conversation with someone the other day. So when you talk about flower, you mean the actual plant, the actual, the stuff you grind. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. But that's it. No, I think that's here in the UK where we don't necessarily talk about it in those terms in the recreational sense.
Yeah, there's we just call it weed or whatever. Yeah, we need to just talk to people how they are. What flower is what you think about when you're buying weed. Now there's all this other stuff. We also need to educate you on that. What are the market's changing? What are fast acting ingredients? Does CBN do anything for sleep? Like there's a million questions there. That's where all of this has to be education. It can't just be, it's not a product category people know, where they're immediately going to go into a comparison shopping, right? I will say reviews are important, those kind of things. You always want that kind of connection. So that kind of shopping still works. But, you're not going on Amazon saying, oh, I'm comparing these two bikes. What's the differences in these two bikes? I know what a bike is. I know how to ride a bike. I know, maybe some of the parts of a bike. I can comparison shop two bikes. If you just set a consumer down in front of an average dispensary menu, they're going to be completely lost if they're new to the industry. So you better lead with education, keep it simple, and have a couple quick, simple recommendations. We always talk about, I think one of the most important things a dispensary or brand can do, and it's really more on the retailers on the dispensary side, is like a new buyer guide. Are you new here? Just it's almost like a condensed menu. Like, here are 5 things to look at.
I mean, that makes sense.
Ignore
the
rest of the store.
Yeah, no, but I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of, you're in a dispensary. But I suppose, where else are they kind of getting this information from, consumers? Obviously, they can look online. They can look at, leaflets and things like that. You can do some research online and see, oh, that looks interesting. Bottle that, and you can kind of get into that. But I suppose it's about creating that engagement in situ. Is that kind of, when we talk about training as marketing, it's like, okay, educating people about what they're about to see, for the people who are curious, and how do you kind of get that in front of them in that dispensary as well?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 parts to that, right? There's one, you have to get them in the door of the dispensary, right? And then you can start with the budtenders or your patient consultants if you're in a medical market. Sometimes there's a pharmacist if you're in a medical market. So you have to kind of look at, adult use versus medical there. Part of me wishes, there was a pharmacist who was educated or a nurse in every dispensary so that you could answer medical questions. That's another topic on education, is what you even can and can't say. But when you talk about where are people finding this information, I think there actually is a gap. And I think some of it's driven by marketing regulations of new consumer information being available. So you mentioned Leafly, Weed Maps, these sites, they may know about them. If you Google anything related to cannabis, you're going to get hits on those sites. Yeah, those sites are still kind of overwhelming for new consumers, right? If you look at it, they're built to drive orders and drive traffic. That's going to be for more of a repeat customer. They can be great when you start looking at, I think about Leafly with strains, right? Like, if you really want to go down that rabbit hole and you're looking at terpenes and cannabinoid blends and percentages there, that can be great if you kind of figure out what works for you and what sits well with you, and then you want to go explore the wide world of the bajillion strains that are out there and their wacky names. It can just be, a fun internet black hole to step into. Not really accessible for the kind of curious consumer there. So I think about it in 2 ways.
No, sorry, I'm going to say it's just more stuff for them to kind of go, what the hell does that mean? Yeah,
overwhelming, right? We'll keep coming back to the word overwhelming. Like, you want to be overwhelmed, stuff on those sites.
It's intimidating as well. I mean, for people. I mean, I guess the idea of, cannabis having been illegal for so long, suddenly someone decides to try it when in legal state, or, and it's like, can we do this? Is this something I can actually do now? And I guess there's that moment of, well, I'm here. It's happening, and I guess that must be quite liberating, but scary. Yeah.
It's liberating and scary. I remember, walking in, dispensaries have changed a lot. And I think new dispensaries opening are following new patterns, and they feel, you hear like, feels like an apothecary or an Apple store, and there's all kinds of different kinds. When they first opened here in Colorado, at least, they were like cinder block, rough buildings. You felt like you were buying drugs. And you talk about scary, and there's lines around the corner. There's armed security guards because we're working in cash. Luckily, we've moved past that, and some of that was just controlled by where you could even get a license and open a store, and a lot of that has changed for the better. But when we look at these websites, what do people search for? How do people get in the door? Honestly, most of it is from peers. It's going to be from your neighbor. It's going to be from another parent on the playground. It's going to be somebody hearing it from their children. Right. This is where I think a lot of the new consumers that maybe don't even consume cannabis, maybe have never consumed cannabis, maybe haven't since high school or college, are coming in. Somebody is telling them about products that are for them. They're sitting around talking about, maybe I should drop that 3rd glass of wine, or, I broke my shoulder and I really don't want to, continue taking pain pills. I'm taking 2 ibuprofen every 4 hours for a month. What should I look at? I'm having trouble sleeping. One of the most common things during the pandemic, that's where you start to see searches come in is, does cannabis work for sleep? Having trouble sleeping. If you can start ranking in those results, then you can pull in some new consumers and let them know that there might be some products for them. But a lot of times it's from some kind of peer. Somebody in a social network is saying, no, I actually had a great experience. Have you gone to that dispensary? Have you gone down there? Oh, let me recommend which one to go to. And by the way, try this maybe lower dose product, or try this beverage, or try something that is a little gentler for somebody coming in, and the classic start low, go slow, right? Start with a lower dose of THC, consume it slowly, see how it sits with you, see if these products are for you. So I still think it's that word of mouth, and part of it is you're not seeing an Instagram ad, right? You're not seeing a Twitter ad. Mm-hmm. You might see some Google ads for some very specific search terms, but these platforms that normally introduce us to new products and new markets, right? I think about Instagram. Instagram is probably one of the best for just new products. You're scrolling through an Instagram feed, you see some wacky thing, and they're trying to sell it to you. You never knew that product existed, right? They're targeting you. They know based on all kinds of parameters that you might be interested. Because marketers in cannabis don't have those tools available to build awareness, mm-hmm. they're working on word of mouth, and they're working on good experiences. And if they get you, if you already are consuming, you're in stores, that bud tender gets you with a couple bullet points about a new product. We always talk about when we do bud tender specific training. Obviously, we want the bud tender trained on these products. What we actually want them to do is impart like fun facts to you. So when you're sitting around the campfire, when you're around the dinner table, when you're in the car ride with somebody, you can remember those. And then it kind of spreads the word of mouth. Like, oh, well, the bud tender said this, this, and this. Hopefully those resonate in your brain, and you can start getting that kind of mini social network effect. But a lot of it's spreading offline because the online angles for marketing are not available to us.
Absolutely. I think it's kind of interesting. I mean, we mentioned sort of bud tenders, and I think I mentioned this briefly before start recording, the idea that bud tenders are very much the sort of gatekeepers for a lot of brands as well. And I guess in a way, a lot of brands and dispensaries need to find ways to become their best friends in a way, to really get that sense of engagement, that sense of, why is your product better than the other? And then again, when you've got, well, I guess I don't know about how it is. I mean, I would imagine Colorado is similar to California in that you have a lot of brands coming in right now. Yep. So it's a case of, well, how do you differentiate when we're talking about strains, which themselves, again, overwhelming? It's like, so you need to have that messaging, that cut through that actually speaks to bud tenders and gives them that kind of information, that anecdotal stuff to help people feel at ease in the dispensary. Do you think that's kind of part of that process as well?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting, the ride through this pandemic and how that's shifted. But then honestly, how we're sitting here kind of at the end of Q1 2022 and how things are kind of coming back to basics in this industry that they were before the pandemic. So we had some data, and we see commonly published data that bud tenders are responsible for upwards of 90% of recommendations in a dispensary. Up to 90% of people will take a bud tender's recommendation. And that comes down to if you make the cut of 3 products on the counter. So we always kind of teach in that sales, right? Have 3 things at 3 different price points that might be interesting. The consumers, 9 times out of 10 going to pick one of those that you put out on the counter. Obviously, every brand wants loyal customers. They want you to go into your store. They want you to ask for their brand. They're still working on that. We are seeing brands that are getting there in certain markets. There are large national brands now that have that following that you love their gummies or you love their pre-rolls. But a lot of cannabis customers, even our team says this all the time. They go in, they're like, I work in this industry. I build this training. I know every product on that shelf. And I still tried something new because the bud tender recommended it. And the bud tender was passionate about it, and they were able to speak to it. These are people that have been in the industry for a decade, are still taking those recommendations.
I was just going to say about bud tenders. I mean, how many do you think have sort of formal training? I mean, I know there's things like Amsterdam University and, there are other kind of online training programs. And I imagine there must be kind of sort of local in-person ones as well as online. But I mean, like you were saying before about, there being a kind of pharmacist, someone who can kind of make medical or even recreational recommendations. How do you, that is quite, I mean, I guess it's people, it's their enthusiasm for the plant and for, the products and things like that. But is there, I guess the majority have just kind of learned it, from the legacy market or from their own passion for it, or, so how do you kind of almost overcome that sort of training, or how do you provide a kind of more, dare I say, professional approach to sort of training? And I don't know. I mean, it's curious because
Herein lies the problem. That we think we're here to solve. I wouldn't claim we've solved it. We're working to build awareness on there is a problem. People should be investing in solving this. Let me give you my perspective. And there are different markets. Medical market differs than adult use. And then we'll see, different states honestly have different regulations around training and what is required. So there's not a universal, still federally legal. We don't have universal federal mandates. There probably will be at some point. But we see common patterns in there. So the most common thing we see is some states require a responsible vendor training. It'd be like bartender training, right? How do you check IDs? How do you not overserve? What are your sales limits? What are the compliance rules? What are the things that are going to protect the license? When we talk about training, that's usually top of mind for a business owner. This is a highly regulated market. There are more wild rules and regulations that are changing rapidly that almost nobody can stay on top of. And you are expecting your retail employees to help protect your license, because they can make a mistake that can get them in trouble, that they can be liable for, they can get your business in trouble. The worst, you can put on probation, you can lose a license. We've seen these cases. These are like the worst things, the things that we want to protect people from. So a lot of states will require a responsible vendor. It's usually a one-day class. Sometimes you have to take it every 2 years. Sometimes you might have to take it every year. But the truth is, there isn't a lot of standard required training. Most of this industry runs on job shadowing, which means if Dave's been here the longest and Dave's the best bud tender, I hope the schedules align and my new employees can spend some time with Dave. And through osmosis, they will just pick up all of Dave's great traits and understand, what he's doing in greeting guests and answering questions and making recommendations and getting them signed up to the loyalty program and upselling them and all the things I want that employee to do. Obviously, that's inconsistent. Obviously, that doesn't scale. One of the things we've been working on with retailers, especially multi-location retailers, as they expand from 1 store to 3 stores to 10 stores, is how do you take, in a very easy way, in a very accessible way, how do you take Dave's knowledge and all the things you want every employee to do consistently in every one of your locations where you now have 200 employees, how do you train everybody, hold them accountable for that? We're having to go out there and do this. Some operators understand this. We see differences like in the Northeast. Here in the US, we're seeing a lot of people come from traditional retail, not from the legacy markets. So it's a little bit different than it's been out west here in Colorado and Oregon and Washington and California. They're kind of bringing formal training programs and salespersonship training and those kind of things. Honestly, out here, we're still building awareness on this is how you're going to scale your business. If you want consistent reviews, if you want those customers to walk away and do that social network effect of telling their friends and getting this, I had a great experience and these people have the best bud tenders and they're super accessible and it's not going to be overwhelming. We want everybody to have that experience, and that requires consistent training. But honestly, it's on the operators right now to create that, invest in that, and make it, because there's not a lot of formal training. When you talk about things like Amsterdam, we love these programs. We love what they're doing. There's a lot of programs like that out there. That's really going to be either people that want to operate in the industry, they want to get a license, they're looking for higher level positions, maybe they want to manage. It's not necessarily going to be every bud tender, or every bud tender is not going to seek that out and lay out their own capital and pay for it. Not every manager is going to pay to send them there. If you think about a bud tender, unfortunately, you're really competing with servers, with fast food employees, and here we're in this great resignation. There's nobody available to work.
It's so you're actually fighting.
McDonald's is going to take your bud tenders and put them in a management program and pay them twice as much and give them health care and send them to college. That's happening all over the US here. So you're literally competing with that in there. So investing in training is important. It's not formalized. Most bud tenders on the job, I'll put a generalization here. Most bud tenders on the job have had no formal training. They've had job shadowing. They've had whatever the minimum required compliance training is. There are better operators than that. That is kind of the average.
So in terms of where you guys come in at ZolTrain with that kind of education piece, how does that kind of fit into that sort of reality that, you know, for bud tenders, for brands, for kind of the, you know, multi-state operators, all of that stuff? Where do you kind of present that kind of connection, that information to help build that word of mouth, really?
Yeah. So, you know, the couple things about our platform, just making it easy and accessible. I'll just say that over and over again. We want to make training easy and accessible. We don't want people to think they have to have an instructional designer or a large enterprise learning management system or these things that, once again, are overwhelming for the operators. They don't come from this. They don't know they need that. They don't know how to shop for that. The first thing we did was made training easy. So we put it on the worker's cell phone. So our training platform that we created, it's all of our own IP, looks and feels like a social media feed. And it's built for kind of bite-sized micro-learning, meaning you've got 5 minutes between activities. Can I train you on a new product that's launching? Can I train you on a new procedure to open the store? Can I train you on a new feature of your point of sale or a new cashless, you know, ATM payment system that the owners just put in that's launching next week? We look at breaking training into like 5-minute segments that look and feel like an Instagram and TikTok feed with, you know, auto playing vertical videos and nice infographics and keep you engaged, keep your eyes on that screen. We did that because if you put it on a PowerPoint, if you put it on a desktop screen, if you stand up in front of people and talk, they get distracted and they pull out their cell phones and they start scrolling through Instagram anyways. So
you may as well be on that phone, right? If that's what they're going to head to, right?
Yep. So we started with creating really, really high-end brand training and then sending it to the budtenders. That was, you know, brands had the budget, brands had this need to train people that don't work for them. That's where we started. What we've been doing now here in 2022 is we took the tools that we use to make that content, made them very, very simple so that a retail store manager can go through and create that 5-minute training, drag and drop, shoot a video on your phone. I talk about job shadowing a lot, right? I'm not telling people that what they're doing is wrong. I'm telling them it doesn't scale. Dave doesn't scale. If Dave's your best bud tender and you own 10 stores throughout a state the size of Colorado or California, Dave cannot be everywhere to train every new employee.
It's like having your state's the size of, you know, England, basically.
Your entire country.
It's a big geography to cover. So
yeah, you can't
be everyone at once. Yeah.
But what Dave can do is take out their cell phone, aim it at themselves, shoot a 2-minute video of highlighting a new product, highlighting a new procedure in the store, doing a walkthrough of how you greet guests. You can actually take your employees, record simple content. You don't need to produce a $20,000 video that's going to be impossible to edit and maintain, is going to be out of date in 2 weeks. But Dave can probably shoot a TikTok style video looking at the camera, which is actually going to resonate better with your employees anyways. Upload it to our platform, add a couple quiz questions, click a button, send it to all of your staff in all the locations, and then hold them accountable. Pull reports and see, have people looked at it? Have people taken the training? Did they go through the short quiz at the end? So we're letting people who have not been used to creating training easily create training. Drag and drop some stock video in there, add some text, add a video, add some quiz questions, send it out, watch and track. So we've that's the retailer side of trying to make it super accessible, super easy, and adaptable at the rate of change that the industry changes at. So the brand training, we do a lot of the content creation on, but we've also given our tools, you think about it as simpler than like a WordPress site to drag and drop and create a training program that looks like a cell phone feed, send it out.
It's like user-generated content versus stuff that you've got from, I guess, paying customers as brands who are kind of keen to kind of put their own, you know, their materials out there. And, you know, but again, you kind of have the best of both worlds in that respect as a kind of, you know, as a retailer, as a dispensary, you can access all of that. We've got these products in the store, so we have that, but also I need to show you how to do this. So again, here we go. Here's the phone. I'll record that 2-minute. Off it goes. And wow, well, that's really cool.
Yeah, our goal is really, we want to be that hub where, and it'll be past dispensaries, right? You've got to have a focus. We're a startup, right? So we did brands first. Now we're working on retailers because we do have that interesting intersection of, it's very unique that they can pull in the brand training. We can put some compliance training. We have our own first party training. We create some Cannabis 101. When we hear something from every retailer, something we're doing more, salespersonship is one of these. There's a lack of training on just budtenders realizing that they're in a sales job, and that it's kind of like an icky feeling. You can't just say that, like, you're doing sales, I need you to upsell, but you're doing customer service. You are doing upsells. You are working for the business. This business is going to stay alive if you make a sale. But you're going to do that by making the right recommendations and getting a loyal customer and getting them back and asking for a review and asking them to tell their friends and all these kind of things. You have to train people to do that. So we're creating some of that content so that operators have this turnkey. That retailer can have it and turn that content on for their employees, create their own content, and then pull in this brand content. So we're kind of a unique hub there. But, we also have the early stages of some cultivation companies on the platform and some extraction and infusion. Maybe it's, how do I work this extraction equipment? How do I work this mold remediation equipment? So we're kind of in the early stages of dabbling in that. That'll be coming. We want to train everybody in this industry. This is the officially in 2021, North America, cannabis created more net new jobs than any other industry. So we're officially number one.
Yeah.
There are more people to train in this industry over the next 4 years than any other industry. People need jobs. They need new jobs. We need workers. And we plan to train all of them in cannabis.
Absolutely. I was listening to a podcast earlier where they're talking about sort of seasonal sort of increases in different jobs when it comes to kind of harvest and things like that. And you have kind of communities set up for a few weeks in like Humboldt Valley and things like, whatever it is, the Emerald Triangle. And, again, the work, there's so many different aspects to the type of work within the cannabis sector. And that's what always strikes me about just how varied it is. I mean, I was at Cannabis over in Barcelona 2 weeks ago, so I'm not just like name dropping just because
Yeah, easier hop for you than me. I didn't get to make it. Easier plane ride for you.
Yeah, exactly. But again, you see that kind of broad sweep of brands. You have everything from that kind of head shop kind of like neon skull bong type stuff all the way up to kind of high end, almost sort of luxury brand type packaging, and it's just again. And that's almost reflected in just the various roles that people can play within the sector as well. You've just got such vast kind of differences and disparities and, which is great. But again, it's kind of like so many different industries in one industry that is kind of still trying to find itself. That's kind of what I got that feeling about. And I think that's an exciting place to be.
It is. And I think that variety, I mean, we almost did it too soon in some ways because there's not quite the customer loyalty that these brands would like to see. And they hate for me to tell them that. They kind of know it, but they're all working on it. They're all investing heavily. But we've got the branding, especially like the California brands. California knows branding. They know CPG branding. So you have this rise of so many brands across that spectrum, and I love them. They're beautiful. We get to work with their content. We get to work with their assets. We get to work with the out there psychedelic and the streetwear focused brands, and then the more medicinal focused brands and everything in between. And we love it. We love seeing the differences there, but it almost leads to that overwhelming aspect of consumers don't know the basics. We're trying to differentiate through branding already on a product that they don't quite understand. And that, you think about branding at that level in a mature, saturated market where branding can be a major differentiator, where you can say, oh, this brand resonates with me, right? I like to skateboard. I like music. Like, this brand is speaking to me. This is kind of the visuals I'm used to. Like, it's what I want to be aligned to. That's the shirt I want to wear. Or, I'm looking more in like the cosmetic or the health or the wellness angle. And because cannabis plays in all of that, you get to have those kind of brands. Once again, it's overwhelming of what is that? What does that brand represent? What kind of products do they make in there? And you launch that in a new market where nobody's ever, bought an eighth of cannabis flower legally. And now I've got this shelf of hundreds and hundreds of products. It's very cool to see. But it is, I've said it 100 times in this, it can be overwhelming to a new consumer. And I really want to make this space accessible to new consumers. One of the reasons we train budtenders is so they can ask the right questions, really make a good recommendation, not just the products they've tried, not just the products they like, not just the products that meet their tolerance level. These budtenders are not the average consumer coming in certain stores and certain locations. They might be, but they're not the consumers we want to bring in. They're not the net new consumers that are going to grow the industry in there. So how do we make the industry accessible across that and not overwhelming?
And even for people who have some degree of knowledge or understanding. I mean, I remember I was in Canada. When was it? It's pre-pandemic. So I think it was 2019. And again, the first time I kind of went to like, consumption lounge, thinking this is like, this is something you just couldn't do in the UK. So they don't exist. Well, not at least legally. But again, and kind of going to the person saying, well, looking at all this stuff. What do you recommend? And it's like, well, what do you want to? How do you want to feel? I'm like, well, slightly relaxed and motivated, and then recommend something for sort of $10. Next minute, I'm like giggling like a schoolgirl, and it's like, oh. Well, this is great and everything. I'm not quite sure whether that, and I kind of, if I'd have known it would have this effect, I would have just taken it back to the Airbnb and just like, chilled. Or
Put on some again, it's kind of anime or something, and
it's that, and that's cool. But it's that whole thing of like when you start to look at it from, I want to be able to kind of sleep, and I think that whole idea of there's different strains that mean different things, the indica, sativa, THC, CBD levels, again, coming back to the overwhelming. I can't remember what it was, but I was reading more and more about brands that are actually sort of packaging their, the product of flower or even oils and things like that as talking about the effect they want to have.
Yep.
And things like that. And so that, again, in a way feels a lot more accessible if you can sort of say, this is kind of like, your nighttime routine, or this is your kind of, perk you up in the morning after a coffee type effect.
It's
you know what I mean?
It's super interesting because most cannabis brands, you're not allowed to, claim. You're not allowed to make claims, right? There's this gray area of like, that's what can you say in marketing, what can you not? And there's a lot of lawyers are making a lot of money in the compliance department looking at packaging and saying, does this meet the packaging requirements in every state? Because it changes. One of the things we do, we work with some national brands that have products in 11 different states. Their packages are different in 11 different states, and they have to meet guidelines in 11 different states, which makes our jobs fun from training, of trying to build some like consistent training where literally every image has to be changed because the budtender's like, that's not what my gummy container looks like in this state. It has a different colored lid, it has different labeling requirement on it. And you go to Canada where they don't even really allow
big yellow sticker. The black packaging, the big yellow sticker. THC.
So
exactly. That's it.
So you can't make those claims. And the interesting thing, we saw a lot of this in last year in 2021, is they just named the product the effect. So the product literally just says sleep on the package, or rest, or relax, or uplifting. And it seems to be compliant. They're able to push it through. It's great for a consumer as long as it meets their expectations. And that's the experience you had, which I do think is not as talked about in this space, and even in the education side, is how much can we train? Like humans are complex individual creatures. Brains are incredibly complex things that we don't understand. We're doing more research. Cannabis is still a Schedule I drug in the US. There's only so much research we can do. There's more than has ever been done, but we're early into it. So how do we model the effects? If you talk about a strain, which is going to have hundreds, if not thousands, of compounds in it. How are those, the whole entourage effect, how are those interacting with each other? Or even a product that has, distilled cannabinoids in it. Some kind of we know this just has CBD and THC and maybe some terpenes in it. How does that interact? And the indicative sativa spread. So we don't know as much as we all like to project we do in this industry, and I'm comfortable saying that. No, that budtender probably thought they were making a good recommendation, and that might have been their personal experience, but it's not how it interacted in your brain.
Well, exactly, and again, it's the whole idea of cannabis is a complex plant, the endocannabinoid system, and I guess it all affects us differently, and it affects your kind of mood at the time. How are you feeling? I mean, I have a lot of friends who just won't go near cannabis just because they've had such a bad experience as a youngster. And it probably played into the fact they were freaking out, like, we're doing something illegal, smoking a joint if police come, and that, that paranoia, that enhances that. And so that's, again, so even in, there's so many different things that it's kind of refreshing when you say that about, we don't know all the answers. We don't know what the effect is. We can kind of just go on our own experience, and the experiences is the majority at a given moment and on a certain thing, but that doesn't mean it's going to be the same thing to every single person.
I think strains are the most complex to understand. And I do think, two people taking the same THC edible are going to have a different experience based on their metabolism and, what they ate. And then I also think anything psychoactive, we think about this more in psychedelics, but I think anything psychoactive, set and setting is going to be important. What mood did you have going into it? What's around it? How are you interacting? Because all of those things are going to release other chemicals in your brain, and that's going to change the balance of how you're feeling and how you're thinking, right? Maybe you were so excited to be out at that consumption lounge at this thing that would normally be a little bit relaxing. You just had other chemicals going in, and the experience you had there was like, let's enhance all of these. You're just excited to be out in the world, and it's a beautiful place, and you get giggly with friends. But strains are so much more complex, right? Because you've got everything from a full blend of cannabinoids, the full whole plant experience there, true full spectrum, to terpenes, to flavonoids, to other things that we're probably going to start discovering how they might interact and impact each other. So we've seen this on the indica to sativa spectrum, right? There's a lot of backlash now around these categories aren't helpful. That's not true. It's not the scientific classification. All that's accurate. We think now that terpenes have more to do, that like an indica type effect is more of a certain prominent terpene profile in there. Good luck trying to talk to a consumer about that. You want to talk about overwhelming, product recommendation. Let's start talking about myrcene and limonene and go down that.
But because people, I guess, again, and this is a sweeping generalization, someone who's really into the plant, within sort of 5 minutes, you're sort of talking about those aspects of it anyway, because that's the way you think about it. And that becomes the kind of entry point for yourself. But talking to someone who's like, well, I just kind of want to chill. And it's like, oh, okay, well, have this then. Without kind of going into the, like you say, the terpene profile and, what's involved. But again, it's some people everyone learns differently or absorbs information differently. And it's kind of like, well, how can we cater for all of those kind of needs? Or some people want to explore, what am I actually taking? What is this? I don't know what this is, and all of that needs to be accessible for those who want to find that out, don't they? So it's like having that information accessible in a way that people can find out as much or as little as they want about something.
Right. I love that. Yes. Yeah. Let them explore, give them the high level. If they're good, they have a great experience, they come back, you're done. Let them scan a QR code on the package and look at the batch profile and a video of the grow and the ingredients they use in the soil. And is this sun grown or not? And how are those impacting me? And sorry if you hear any background noise. There's somebody putting a tree down across the street, because you can, plan these things perfectly. You walk outside of the car, there's just a tree coming down. But I think, there are consumers that kind of want to be, and I tend to do this, like I geek out and research anything I'm buying. So I want to do that. I want to see the chart of the terpene profiles and understand this and keep a log and try to feel, I had this effect. Can I find something similar? Another challenge we've seen in that is that I worry a little bit about inaccessibility. We've seen this in California a lot. We've seen it in a lot of mature markets. There's been this race to increase THC percentage. There's been this, can I get the most THC for the money? You're obviously selling to a certain specific type of consumer that has a higher tolerance that's looking for that. We can debate, does the THC percentage impact your effects that much? But it is what it is. And it comes to, I see people posting and talking about, I have this great harvest of this strain and it's testing at 17% and I could never sell it. There are so many people that plant is probably perfect for. The people that you're talking about that didn't have a great experience, that just wanted to kind of have a subtle effect and rest and relax and hang out. And I worry that if we don't support that and do the right education, and that we don't prove that there are buyers out there for that we almost end up breeding out some of the genetics that could be really important for people that need certain effects base, and they just don't want to get as high as possible if that's what the high THC percentages are doing, or just have a high tolerance.
But that's interesting. I mean, I think that, again, it's almost like you think about alcohol, and you want to have a beer with friends. That's one thing. If you want to kind of go out, do shots and have cocktails or whatever, that's a completely different scenario. So again, it's thinking about cannabis as different types of cannabis, THC strains and things like that. As I think of it as kind of, well, what kind of mood you're in. So this is what you want to do. This is what you use that for. But again, there isn't necessarily that awareness in the same way. But it's also like, I think more so here in Europe, this side of the pond, you have, because of the sort of status, cannabis, recreational is only just becoming legal in certain countries like Malta, for example. I think Germany have approved it. It's going to happen at some point. But again, there's still that very much, here in the UK, where medical cannabis is legal, but not well known about. you're still seeing lots of kind of CBD products coming through. And, I see that in the local pharmacy in this small town where I live. And that's, CBD patches, and you wouldn't necessarily think of that as cannabis. It's the sort of thing that anyone could buy, as a kind of pain relief thing. So again, maybe when you're coming into it from the angle that, you're kind of building up that health and wellness kind of profile of it in a kind of consumer medical market. And eventually, and I'm hopeful one day there will be kind of, adult use here in the UK, at least there will be that kind of more of an educated market around the products and the plant itself, rather than we're here to get wasted and let's do it properly type. Do you know what I mean? But there's room for that. There's room for all of that, like you say, when you've got a kind of,
because I think those products are perfect. Some of my favorite products to recommend. So I do this a lot. I'm a dad. I talk to other parents. Most of the people, my network, everybody knows I work in cannabis that I talk to. But I have a network that's outside of cannabis, right? I have kind of like a traditional tech network here in Denver, and then I just have like my parents and the friends and family. So I get a lot of this. I got a lot of it during the pandemic. I think a lot of us working in this industry have been fielding a lot of questions from family members and, peers just are, okay, I'm thinking about this. I'm dealing with some anxiety. I'm dealing with whatever they're coming to. A lot of us are playing budtender on a daily basis through text messages. And can I talk to my friend about this and these kind of things?
Sure.
My favorite products are ratioed products with CBD. I think that, from my experience, everybody's experience is going to be different, but from my success in recommending those, I think you can cut some of the raciness and the paranoia in there. So I think you're talking about like CBD being available in the market, because here in Denver, like CBD products weren't even available until after we already had legalized cannabis. It was like kind of the same time, right?
Okay.
Like the hemp bills and the farm bills were coming out. Like we already had medical for 5 years, and that passed after. We actually couldn't sell pure CBD products in dispensaries that came from hemp until later on. So you could only sell THC products. So we were kind of backwards in it. So it'll be very interesting to see in a market where everybody knows CBD. Because I would almost just introduce it like, okay, now take that same product with a little bit of THC. Like say, take something that's got 2 milligrams of THC or even like 1 milligram, and then you kind of step up, because you are going to get an entourage effect there. You are going to, potentially make that CBD more bioavailable through THC. There's going to be an impact there. It might help with whatever the CBD was helping with. But this even comes down to strains. And these, I'm glad that I have a few dispensaries that have growers that support the medical market, because even on the strain side, I love recommending 1-to-1 or like 3-to-2 CBD strains. So if we were having a backyard barbecue and we were in a location, somebody's like, hey, do you have a strain that we should try? I've always got something like Harlequin or Sour Tsunami or something in here, which sometimes tests at less than 10% THC. It is more of a 1-to-1. And the thing that I hear all the time, we always just kind of joke, it's just like dad weed, is like, oh, this is kind of like what I, smoked in high school and what I remember cannabis being, versus I went into a dispensary and bought a pre-roll, and maybe it was an infused pre-roll with 80% THC in it because they put hash in it. And then I was on the moon or whatever. There are strains out there. And some of them are interesting because they're actually coming from the hemp side. There are some hemp strains, because hemp and cannabis is the same plant, right? There's some hemp strains that test hot for THC, so you can't sell as hemp, but are perfect for a medical market, or perfect for potentially a new consumer that have, high CBD, high CBG, other minor cannabinoids in it. So I love those products. So I would say that kind of adds to, that path that you're talking about of like, if CBD is well known and is accepted, THC becomes available, maybe that market will sustain higher level of CBD, lower level THC products, and have just a better entry. And we are seeing those come in new markets here. I'm seeing a lot of in beverages. We're seeing a lot of cool products that are low THC products that I think are the perfect, try this. You're unlikely to have a bad experience with this. Everybody's unique, but you're not having to tell people to rip the corner off of a 10 milligram gummy and go slow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think, that's just really interesting. I think, again, it's curious to see how it all sort of kind of play out, I think, here. And I guess in other states. But I've looked at sort of a map of the US, where is cannabis legal? And it's kind of like, have the kind of outer edge, the kind of the West and the East Coast. And then the closer you get to the middle, the more kind of like we catch you with CBD here, we're bringing out the wagon type thing. It's
right. Yeah.
It's that kind of it's like, whoa, okay. But again,
it's changing. We're even seeing the Southeast now with some medical bills coming online. We'll see if the governor support it. The people support it, right? Overwhelmingly, the population supports it. It becomes a political issue, and can you get it passed? Even if you pass a bill, can you get a governor, to not veto it in there? But tide's obviously shifted. Like it's happening everywhere, and the truth is, most people at least live near a state where they can cross the border and get it, right? There's very few areas where there's not some place, and then tax revenue starts to shift it over in there. But it's becoming more accessible at that level. And I think I do think now that there's been more than a decade of legalization in the US, that there is a better pattern for states. We've learned all the wrong things to do. We've learned a couple of right things to do. We're not seeing every state do it right. You do see these mixtures of like too many licenses of one type or the other coming out that makes it hard. But in general, we've kind of learned what dosages to launch with, what product categories to launch with. And we do have established brands and genetics. So when a new state comes online, I feel like the product blend available to a new consumer is more accessible. And if we pair that with education, I think we're setting ourselves up for people having a really good first experience with cannabis should they want to try it.
Brilliant stuff. That's great. So what's next for ZolTrain? Where are you guys going to be? What's your plan for sort of the next 12 months, I guess? Where do you want to be sort of this time next year?
Yeah, our big thing here, we want to train, everybody in the cannabis workforce. We do that by next year, we're good. Won't be there, but our big thing this year is really reaching out to retailers. We do have a new offering. We've got the brand stuff. We do that really well. That's not going anywhere, but we are, really reaching out to these multi-location retailers to say, here's a better way to do training. We can help you scale. We can give you the tooling that we've been using. We can give you some great turnkey content. We can show you the ropes and how to build an easy onboarding program and continuous training program for your employees. That's a big thing for us. I think the East Coast is really kind of new. Actually, it's almost the middle and the East, right? You look around like Arizona, New Mexico, Illinois, and then you go, Massachusetts has a lot going on right now. And then we're going to see New Jersey and New York. So for us, I think there's going to be a lot of new markets. We do really well in California, Colorado, do pretty well in states like Oklahoma and Nevada right now. But we're kind of going into these new states that have gotten established, that are now up and running. We don't want to hit them day one. They've got plenty to do there, just getting their grows going, getting the stores open and figuring it out. But it's almost like year two of a market is where we want to come in and say, okay, you've got the basics figured out. Now you need to work on staff retention, scalability, consistency, outperform your competition in there. We've got some great tooling for that. So we're going to be in those states.
And operating as a business, I guess, isn't it? Yeah. Rather than just like, oh shit, we need to kind of get with the programs. Like, okay, you got with the program. Now here's how no, that's cool. That's really, really cool. And I have to ask about the Rolling Stone Culture Council.
Okay.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. I think it's really cool. Obviously, like I think I had like a joke post on LinkedIn about this is the closest I'll ever get to the cover of the Rolling Stone. Mostly guitar on my wall. Yeah. I'm a failed musician, so I had to pick up technology because I can fix the guitar. I can't play it exceptionally well. I was always kind of the nerd and the engineer there. I can swap pickups on it, but they let me play bass. I'm a bass player by trade. So cool. Obviously Rolling Stone resonates with me through there. But no, Rolling Stone's doing a really cool thing supporting cannabis. So they've got this thing, the Culture Council, and it's a great networking group. It's a great opportunities for like writing guest posts on rollingstone.com and kind of talking about these things. And they've got it for, arts and music and things you would traditionally think Rolling Stone is associated with. But I think a year ago or so, they started to put together a cannabis culture council. And there's a lot of great cannabis industry leaders. I'm honored to be, amongst them. There's great online discussions. It's just it's a great networking group. And you're starting to see more and more content on Rolling Stone talking about the cannabis industry. There's been some amazing articles out there, just, Rolling Stone helping build awareness. Obviously their audience, there's that intersection of art music and cannabis. Absolutely. Now. So it's a great peer group and it's a great place for us all just to get together and help promote what's going on in the industry and help build some of that awareness and people that are interesting. I think it reaches a lot of people that might want to work in the industry and start to see it. If you're a regular reader of Rolling Stone, and then you start to see about this legalization, these efforts, and what it takes to get a license, and social equity issues, and you're like, oh, this is something I could participate in. So a lot of that is also just building awareness externally to this audience about what's happening in the cannabis industry.
Very cool. Very cool. Excellent. Great stuff. I don't know if I have any other questions, but no, thank you. There's been a lot there. I'm not sure if I even covered my initial questions, but I've certainly had it's been great speaking with you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to. It's always an education. Every conversation I have with people, there's always something new to learn about the sector, about how it's operating in one part of the world, and being able to compare and contrast with my own experience and other people's experiences. It's great. So there we go. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm excited to come across the pond and get more time in Europe and see what's going on there. We're kind of stuck in our state by state. It feels like we're operating 50 different countries here because we do have different sets of legislation. I love it when it happens at a national level, like in Canada, like we're going to see hopefully in Mexico soon, and then take it over to Europe. So next Cannabis, we'll see you in Spain and see you there.